Alright guys, so our learning targets today are I can determine whether or not a table shows a proportional relationship, and I can identify the unit rate in a table. So when I'm talking about a table, I'm talking about a table of values that looks like this. So it says, remember that two equal ratios form a proportion. Alright, so that just means if you have two fractions that are equal, they're equivalent to each other, that's a proportional relationship. So if we have a table of values, one way that we can tell if it represents a proportional relationship is writing the ratios for each of the points in the table in this form, y divided by x. So when you look at a table, the first column is your x value, and the second column is your y value. So for each one, you would do the y over the x. Write them as fractions, and then simplify them, and then compare them and see if they're all the same. So the first example there says, Brooke receives an allowance of $3 per week. Her older sister gets $4 per week. Brooke's parents say that it's fair because the allowance is proportional to each child's age. Brooke wants to test her proportionality to determine if her parents' strategy is fair. So we just want to know, is this a proportional relationship? All right, so first thing I'm going to do, step one, is rewrite each row as a ratio, a fraction, and it's y over x. So this would be 2/8, 3/12, and 4/16. Then, just like we did yesterday, you're going to simplify these. So you can just type them into your calculator, and if you take a minute and type those three into your calculator, all right, and then you're going to see if they come out equal. And they are all going to come out to be 1/4. So because all the ratios are equivalent, that tells me that yes, this is a proportional relationship. The next question says, decide if the relationship below is proportional or not. So again, we have a table of values here, and our first step is going to be to write the fractions y over x. So your second column is y, first column is x. So I would have 6 over 1, 12 over 2, 18 over 3, and 24 over 4. All right, then I'm just going to simplify those. So you can type them into your calculator, simplify them, and they're all going to come out to be 6. Now, since they're all equivalent, they're all equal to 6, that tells me that yes, this is a proportional relationship. All right, if we look at the one at the top of the next page here, it says decide if that's proportional or not. And again, one way to do this would be to write down the ratios, the fractions. So I would have 3 over 2, 4 over 3, 5 over 4, and 6 over 5. Okay? If you type these into your calculator, you're not going to get the same answer every time. Okay? So if I type in, you can either do division or do the fraction. So if I do division, 3 divided by 2 is 1.5. 4 divided by 3 is 1.3 repeating. So I don't even have to test these other ones because I already have two that don't match. So this is going to be a no. That's not proportional. So this is one way that we can figure out if we have a proportional relationship, by writing the fractions and simplifying or dividing them and see if we get the same thing. There's also a shortcut method, but it doesn't work every time. So it says the table shows a proportional relationship if there's some number that you can multiply or divide each quantity by to get each x quantity by to get the corresponding y quantity. So if I look back at the ones that I already did, we said that this one with the age and the allowance was proportional, and if I look, I can figure out each of these is being divided by 4 to give me the allowance. So 8 divided by 4 is 2, 12 divided by 4 is 3, and 16 divided by 4 is 4. All right, so that tells me, yes, that's proportional. This one, I could say, oh, each of these is getting multiplied by 6 to go from the number of tickets to the cost. So that would tell me that it's proportional. All right, so if you take a second and look at this one, it says the table below shows the relationship between cost of renting a movie to the number of days on rent. All right, so take a second, just look at that table and see if you can figure out, is there some number that you could multiply or divide by every time to go from the number of days to the cost. All right, so hopefully by looking at that, you saw that 6 divided by 3 is 2, 9 divided by 3 is 3, 24 divided by 3 is 8, and 3 divided by 3 is 1. So I'm going to say, yes, this is proportional because every time I could divide by 3 to get the cost. All right, question at the bottom says, you've been hired by your neighbors to babysit their children on Friday night. You're paid $8 per hour. Complete the table relating your pay to the number of hours you worked. All right, so step 1, we're just going to fill in the table. Now we know that we get $8 for each hour, so I know if I work for 1 hour, that's going to be $8. If I work for 2 hours, 16, 3 is 24, so this is just your 8 times table. Okay, 32. I'm going to skip 4.5 for a second, and we'll talk about that. 5 would be $40, 6 would be 48, and I'll come back to 6.5. All right, so this is just saying every hour $8, so I'm basically multiplying by 8. For 4.5, there's a couple ways that you can think about it. For a lot of people, what they think is, well, if 1 hour is $8 and I only work for a half an hour, then if I cut that in half, that would be $4. So I would only add 4 for the half hour, so this would be 36. And then same thing down here, 0.5, that's half an hour, so I would only add 4 this time to get 52. The other way you can think about this is each time we're multiplying by 8. So 1 hour times $8 is 8. Hours times $8 is 16. So if I wanted to figure out for 4.5 hours how much I would make, I would just multiply the hours I work times how much I'm getting paid per hour. And same thing down here, 6.5 times 8, that'll give me 52. So then it asks, based on the table above, well, I guess it should say next to, is pay proportional to hours worked? All right, so if I look, each time, in order to get the pay, I'm multiplying by 8. So that tells me, yes, this is a proportional relationship, because each time I'm multiplying by 8. So then the last part of the question, how much would you make in 20 hours? Well, each time we took the number of hours worked and we multiplied by 8. So if I had 20 hours, I would multiply that by 8 and get $160. Up at the top of the next page, it says, as the numbers in a table get larger, it's harder to tell just by looking at the table whether you have a proportional relationship or not. So for example, in a situation like this, I can't look at this table and automatically know 3 times what is 35,700, or 4 times what is 47,600. I don't know, the numbers are too big. So my backup plan, if I can't use the shortcut, is to divide. I'm going to find the unit rate each time and compare and see if they're the same. So it says, the chart shows the total number of miles Zach has driven his car at the end of 3 years, 4 years, and 5 years. Is the number of miles Zach has driven proportional to the number of years? So I'm just going to divide each of these. All right, so I'll take my first point, and I'll do 35,700 divided by 3 and see what I get. I'll do 47,600 divided by 4, because that's my second point. And then I'll do 59,500 divided by 5, because that's my third point. All right, we always divide y divided by x, and your first column is your x, and your second column is your y. So if you divide each of these on your calculator, they should all come out to 11,900. Your units, this was miles and this was years, so it would be 11,900 miles per year. And we would get the same thing for each of these. All right, so step 2, compare, see if they're all the same. Well, they all came out to 11,900, so we're going to say yes, this is a proportional relationship because my unit rate is the same every time. It's 11,900 miles per year. Okay, and also what that would mean is that I could do 3 times 11,900 to get 35,700. I could do 4 times 11,900 to get 47,600. Right, so the last thing we're going to talk about here is actually finding the unit rate. And we've basically already done that in the questions that we were doing. So it says, if a table shows a proportional relationship, you can find the constant of proportionality or the unit rate from the table. So constant of proportionality is just a fancy way of saying unit rate. It's the same thing. In order to have a constant of proportionality, you have to have a proportional relationship. So when you have these questions that ask you to find the constant of proportionality or the unit rate, you need to first determine if you have a proportional relationship. All right, so for this question, it says the table below shows the amount of money a booster club made washing cars for a fundraiser. Does the table represent a proportional relationship? If so, use the information in the table to find the unit rate in dollars per car. All right, so this over here, the steps, this is one way to do it. We said the shortcut was look at the table, see if there's something you could multiply or divide by every single time. So if I look at this, I see I could multiply each of these by 8, and that's going to tell me the amount of money. All right, so I'm going to say yes, this is a proportional relationship because each time I'm multiplying by 8. If I want to know what the unit rate is, because it's a proportional relationship, the unit rate is going to be the same for every point on this table. So I can pick any point I want and divide y divided by x. So if I pick the first point here, okay, first column is x, second column is y, so I would divide 40 divided by 5, which is going to get me 8. So my unit rate is 8. Now you'll notice we already figured that out. That was what we were multiplying by every time. So this number right here, whatever you multiply by every time, that is your unit rate. All right, so here, the unit rate is 8, and if I look at my units, it was money divided by number of cars, so it's going to be $8 per car. Okay, so if you look at the one at the top there, it asks, is it a proportional relationship, and then if it is, find the unit rate. So before you try to find the unit rate, the first thing you need to do is decide, is that proportional? Okay, so if you take a minute and you look at that table, all right, I'm looking here, so far it looks good. 1 times 3 is 3, 3 times 3 is 9, 4 times 3 is 12. When I get to the bottom one, 7 times 3 is not 18. So this is a no, that's not proportional, which means there's not a constant unit rate. All right, so I'm done there. Okay, if I look at the next one there, okay, it's asking, is this proportional? So again, I'm looking for some number I could multiply or divide by every time. This one happens to be 8. Okay, this is x, this is y, so y divided by x would be packs per box, so it would be 8 packs per box. Okay, and I'll say yes, that is proportional because each time I multiplied by 8. I'm going to skip this one and just go to the last one really quick here, just to point something out. So it says, Randy is planning to drive from New Jersey to Florida. Randy recorded the distance traveled and the total number of gallons used every time he stopped for gas. Assume miles driven is proportional to gallons consumed in order to complete the table. So it's telling us this is a proportional relationship. Now go fill in the rest of the table. So one way that we can do this is find the unit rate. So I can pick any point on the table. There's only 2 of them that are filled in. So I'm just going to start with this first one. And I'm going to divide y divided by x. So 54 divided by 2. And that's going to give me 27. So my unit rate is 27 miles per gallon. What that means is that each time, if I know the gallons, I can multiply that by 27 to get the miles. So 4 times 27 would be 108. I'm going to skip this one for a second. This one's already filled in. 10 times 27 would be 270, and then 12 times 27 would give you 324. For this one that I skipped, the reason I skipped it is this one is backwards. We know the miles, we're trying to find the gallons, so instead of multiplying by 27, if I'm going backwards, I'm going to divide by 27. So I'm going to type 189 divided by 27, and that'll tell me that that's 7 gallons.